think the examples this morning have been fascinating, and the kind of range and all the rest. And I think it's a moot point whether Glasgow has a civic agreement as such. I said as much in an email to Tim and to Des, though we have a formal MOU with all of the universities and colleges in the city. I suppose the context for Glasgow and this sort of discussion, from my perspective, and I'm at the University of Strathclyde, but spent 25 years in economic development with the Scottish Development Agency and Scottish Enterprise and Glasgow Development Agency, etc., is universities are and have always been an integral part of Glasgow's civic and business life. And its fabric. So that's always been the case. 600 years, you'll hear from Des in the case of Glasgow, and I would like to say 200 years, given their antecedent organisation at Strathclyde, which was essentially set up as a free university if it was a European one. I suppose the other thing, and I like Julian's inside out, outside in sort of one. The outside in is Glasgow's always had a strong civic culture. I would even go so far as to say, and this maybe is the case also in Manchester, almost a city-state kind of culture and ethos. That has negatives as well as positives, but that's how it is. And the university principals have always been, and academics generally, have always been viewed as key players within the city, irrespective of the individuals. So the office and the role has always been recognised, reflecting their scale, their expertise, and I suppose maybe more importantly, the kind of global and national perspectives and links. So you'll find university principals popping up on the health board. We don't have health trusts. Glasgow Development Agency, the Scottish Council of Economic Advisors, the Glasgow Centre for Population Health. So they are well integrated, I think, civically into the universities are integrated into civic life, and that's true of the colleges and the specialist institutions too. I suppose from my perspective, the big one that I'm involved in is Glasgow Economic Leadership, set up post-crash in 2008, to kind of chart a way for the city out of the impacts of the global financial crisis. The city turned to, that was the Chamber of Commerce, so the business community in the city turned to the principal of the University of Strathclyde, Professor Sir John MacDonald, to lead a group of civic leaders and business leaders to chart a kind of future for the city. And GEL is very much now recognised as the principal strategic leadership forum for the city. It's a leadership board. It's not an executive board. It has no executive resources or tools at its disposal but it's a bringing together of the leadership, the civic leadership, the political, the administrative leadership, private sector leadership, and senior public sector figures in the city. So it is a kind of triple, quadruple helix sort of model. It also has a number of key sector work streams to the same design, made up of people from the university sector, the colleges, business, and key public agencies, including the council. And those go across, the key sectors that the original commission, which then became the leadership, identified in terms of engineering, environment, life sciences, tourism, finance and business services, and importantly, higher and further education, because I think the city sees higher and further education as a sector, and I think up until then, too often, universities and colleges were seen as inputs into other sectors rather than a sector with economic strengths in its own right. So GEL, higher and further education, brings together the three universities in the city, Glasgow, Strathclyde and Caledonian, the two specialists, the Conservatoire and Glasgow School of Art, and the three colleges or super colleges that have been pulled together. Plus it has representation from the City Council and the Director of Education and the head of the Chamber of Commerce. And that is a principal forum, I'm not saying the only forum, but a principal forum for the universities to engage with the city and with each other, interestingly. A number said that they meet in various meetings, but they never meet together in Glasgow. And I think that's an important issue, that it is place-based. It's identified its key priorities going into the future. There's around innovation, skills, and international. Innovation round the 3 innovation districts that are anchored by the 2 universities, one round Glasgow's campus, one round Strathclyde, and one out at the airport, anchored round some engineering institutes of the university. Skills, clearly, and these are all informed by economic recovery priorities. Skills and the impact of the current pandemic are going to be severe, and getting good alignment and articulation between the sectors is important, and then continuing international, both on the research side and obviously on student income. GEL has been involved in the Glasgow Economic Recovery Group. How do we respond to the economic impact of COVID? Both principals are on it. Professor Sir Jim from the GEL perspective, Professor Anton from the perspective of the city region, where he chairs the city region body that Des will talk about. And they both initiated themselves as part of the economic recovery high-level bilateral discussions on cooperation and future opportunities between the 2 universities, which have been ongoing now for a number of months, which look to see how the universities, particularly the 2 big research-intensive universities, can assist in terms of economic recovery and attract investment to the city. I suppose in a sense, GEL in an English context is, if indeed the LEPs are still exist, I don't know if they do, local economic partnership, it is the equivalent of the local economic partnership, and the universities are very tied into that. I'll maybe just leave it there and pass on to Des, who can talk about the city region level and also the formal MOU round research that he helped in his city.
Thanks very much, Kevin. As Kevin has said, there is a city region body called the Commission for Economic Growth, which actually was originally set up around the Glasgow City deal, which I think is the 2nd biggest city deal in the UK after Birmingham. The Commission was set up basically to advise on evaluation, but has evolved into a strategic body, so it's a high level of academic support, but also some expertise drawn from different parts of business and the public sector, and it acts really to kind of support the City Deal Cabinet in identifying priorities. So I've just come from a City Deal Cabinet meeting where there was a big presentation by Alan McGregor, who's a member of the Commission, on the skills strategy going forward, which was very well received. As Kevin said, we're involved, both GEL and the Commission, from a city and a city region point of view, in the economic recovery strategy, which is a city strategy, but there's also a regional equivalent. These two intersect quite closely. I think other things to point out maybe are the kind of level of cooperation we're now beginning to generate between Glasgow and Strathclyde, largely triggered, I think, by the need to respond to COVID, and also an awareness, I think, both in the 2 universities and in the city and beyond it, that the universities are actually big economic actors. So we are probably the 3rd and the 4th, or 3rd and the 5th largest employers in Glasgow, so what we do in our economic role plays a significant factor in the success or otherwise in the city. And that's in combination with a knowledge role. So I think there's a recognition as well that the universities can bring expertise and knowledge from the range of different academic specialisms that they can bring to bear, and that this can actually support not just the city council, and the other local authorities, but actually we've all got historical relationships with people like the health board, the cultural sector, etc., etc. One of the particular things that we've been involved with I've been involved with personally is setting up an academic advisory group to support the social recovery task force, which the city has set up. And the idea behind that is that we curate in the academic expertise that comes in from 4 universities across the city region to topics that in a sense the city itself is interested in, whether that's domestic violence against women or the impact of COVID on Black and ethnic minority communities or whatever. I mean, in a sense, the agenda is set by the city and the various voluntary sector agencies that they're involved with, and the universities have a chance to kind of be proactive in responding to these issues, to provide research, but also to respond to research requests or needs that the city themselves identify. The health board is particularly important, or the health dimension is particularly important in this. So Glasgow's, one of the places where the UK has got a lighthouse. And that's been very important in terms of the viral response, and certainly, Glasgow University is a very big medical university and kind of strong life sciences components. So we've been very involved in taking forward innovation in that sector. But I think there's a real strong cooperation between, Strathclyde University, Glasgow University, Caledonian and other universities to try to provide an integrated higher education response. And I think one of the things we want to do looking ahead is to see what other areas we can cooperate in. So we're looking quite closely at how we cooperate around COP26, for example. We've got joint activities associated with that we're bringing forward. And I think there's also a sense in which we're trying to find a way where we can combine a top-down approach with a bottom-up approach. So we harness the expertise and energy of our staff and indeed our students, who've been very proactive in looking at the implications of COP, and at the upper tier, to link that to agreements that we're making, or cooperation efforts that we're making between the city and the universities. And I think the challenge is really dealing with the bit in the middle. So how do we get the academic units and the middle tier decision making within the university to fit in with both the energy coming up from below and the intention being driven from above. We do have formal agreements in place. We do have various memoranda of understanding which actually relate to the operation of the innovation districts, which operate to the agreement to set up the social recovery task force, etc., etc. So there's a myriad of these different agreements. Whether we need to put energy into coordinating these different agreements into a single agreement, or whether it's best to do a kind of experimental process, where we develop cooperation, build up trust, and take that forward, is an interesting set of issues that we have to face. I mean, I think where we're at the minute is that there probably isn't much scope at the city region level to spend a lot of time, negotiating agreements per se. They would far rather get inputs from us to help them in dealing with their exigencies. And what's really important about this is developing a dynamic conversation between the universities and the partners, so since we understand what each other can bring to the table, and then find ways to cooperate and make it effective.